Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. It is your boy once again, the host of the Horror Tavern. My name is BD, and make sure that you grab a seat, you take a drink, as we explore the limitless cavern once again, that is the horror genre. And today we're going to be talking about a really good kids slash YA slash pseudo YA short story horror collection. One of two books that was published by one of my favorite authors, and I would assume a lot of you watching, a popular and well-liked author amongst you, which is R.L. Stine. So this short story collection actually had a lot of its stories adapted into the famous Haunting Hour TV show, one of the best, in my opinion, the best kids horror TV show out there. I think 9 out of these 10 stories in this collection ended up being adapted. And funny enough, the second book in this pairing, they almost had like none of its stories adapted into the TV show, despite them having the same name. So if you forgot what the title of the video is, or you're just getting into the feel of it, I'm talking about The Nightmare Hour. This was one of 2 short story collections, excuse me, published by R.L. Stine. The second one was The Haunting Hour. This is a very good short story collection, but The Haunting Hour is even better. That is, The Haunting Hour short story collection is my favorite R.L. Stine book that's not tied to Goosebumps. That one is like the Deckard Shaw of Fast and Furious 7 compared to the younger brother in Fast and Furious 6, which is this book, My Big Bad Big Brother. That's not how Jason Statham talks. We're going to pretend that's how Jason Statham talks just for the sake of my bit. Jason Statham actually cameos in one of these short stories. He's the 11th story in this short story collection called My Big Bad Big Brother. Anyway, The Nightmare Hour, it's a short story collection of 10 short stories by R.L. Stine. They're sort of darker than what you get in stuff like Tales to Give You Goosebumps and other stuff he's written. These are darker, more disturbing stories. They're also longer and more fleshed out, and they are quite good. This is actually a reread. I read this book, I think like almost a year ago, and I'm rereading it now, and I actually like it more than I did the last time. So these stories have aged pretty well in terms of me experiencing more horror. I actually appreciate these stories more. And even though The Haunting Hour, which I'm going to start rereading, will be better, this is still a great pickup, and I recommend you go get this. So without further ado, let's talk about The Nightmare Hour by R.L. Stine. First off, this book has fantastic artwork. I mean, there's some great artwork in this book. Some examples are like Pumpkinhead. It has amazing artwork of like a scarecrow, some pumpkins, a dark, pumpkin field. You have Make Me a Witch, which is arguably one of the best pieces of artwork in this entire book. You have What's on My Thumbnail, which is the artwork to the ghostly stare. Haunting, terrifying, really dark, really sinister artwork that will impress you and enhances the stories, much like something like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark would do for you. The artwork's not to that level, but it's still very good. And let's go one by one through all 10 of these stories. So the first story in here was Pumpkinhead, and this story I gave an 8.5 out of 10. This is a very good short story. Pumpkinhead is about these 3 kids who, right as Halloween is coming up, they go to this pumpkin field, and they decide to go try to pick out some pumpkins. They check around, this field and see if they can get some, stuff to decorate for jack-o'-lanterns on Halloween, which I think is either tomorrow night or maybe it's even like the same day. And as they're checking it, the farmer on this field is known to be very shady. He's sort of like a really disturbing, sort of creepy old guy. I think his name is Farmer Palmer. He's a really creepy, really eerie guy, really paranoid. He sort of acts weird around a bunch of different kids and customers who come by his pumpkin field. And a lot of people just say he gives off bad vibes. So as the kids are walking around, it's, I think, the brother, his friend who's a girl, and then the younger brother who's like this very rambunctious, rebellious little menace of a kid. And they start messing around the pumpkin field. They start playing around with the pumpkins. They get into some accidents, and Farmer Palmer confronts them and basically threatens them, don't mess with my pumpkins. And he specifically threatens them to not touch the pumpkins that are over in this blocked off shed area that he keeps his special batch that are getting ripe. So as they basically get threatened, they go back home and get ready to go out for Halloween night. And the little brother is very much sort of like offended by what Farmer Palmer threatened him with, because Farmer Palmer actually like palmed the little brother's head and said, "Oh, it's not ripe yet." And he thought that was weird, very appropriately thought that was weird. Stranger danger, bad touch, from JonTron. He thought that that was, not cool. And the friend of the older brother thinks that he's really creepy as well. So they actually end up finding out that the little brother decides to go take the bus and sneak off to Farmer Palmer's, terrible, confusing ass tongue twister of a name. He goes out to his pumpkin field to go mess with it, take some spray paint and like graffiti the pumpkins and mess with them. The brother and friend just decide to tag along to make sure that the brother gets back home safe, and they also kind of want to get some revenge. They also have some undertoned anger. And once they get there, they find out the secrets of this pumpkin field, and it is creepy, dude. The descriptions of the scarecrows, the reveal about what's happening at this pumpkin field is disturbing, horrific. You get some body horror. You get some really, really creepy stuff in there. And yeah, this was a very good short story. A nice one to read on Halloween. I recommend you at least pick up this collection to read on Halloween, especially for that story. And I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. Very good short story. The next one is Alien Candy. No, I'm not talking about fentanyl. Alien Candy is a short story about this kid who gets invited to this club. It's like a little club that he forms at his school, and he's kind of like a new kid. He feels very shy. So you got these, I think 4 or 5 other kids that meet up in one of their attics or something. They meet up in this attic, and they are part of this space. It's either a space or alien club, or I think it's a space club. They're all a fan of stuff involving space. They're fans of stuff like, Star Trek. I mean, it's not called Star Trek, but Star Trek and Star Voyagers and those kind of shows dealing with alien life as well. And he feels sort of uncomfortable because, excuse me, they nominated him as the president of this club, and he thinks that he wants to make a good impression on him. He wants these guys to be his friend. He wants to get a sense of belonging. But they feel very much distant. They don't really give him much, mind or anything. And then eventually they give out this little sticky toffee stuff, this candy in a bowl that they call alien candy. And when they eat it, he sees very much that these guys are very obsessed with space. They're very obsessed with extraterrestrial life. And they sort of role play a lot. And then there's a twist. There is a big twist involving these kids, which was predictable. It was predictable, but I did like some of the stuff in the climax, potentially involving transformation sequences, some dark fates awaiting the main character. And yeah, it was quite disturbing for what it was. As goofy as the artwork for this story is, as predictable as the premise is, it's not bad. It's an okay, decent story for the most part. So that's Alien Candy. I would give it a 6.5 out of 10. So a decent, fine story. The next one is a straight, excuse me, I'm coughing, much like some of the horrific stuff that happens to the character in this story. But this is one of my favorite short stories in this entire collection. One of my favorite kids' horror stories that I've ever read, and that is The Most Evil Sorcerer. The Most Evil Sorcerer. It takes place back in the medieval era. So R.L. Stine's actually going to a different time period, an alternate setting. This is back in the medieval period. And this kid, who often pulls a lot of pranks around the local village and town, he's very poor. His parents kind of want him to find an opportunity to make some money for them so they can meet ends. And he ends up getting invited to this castle that belongs to this very powerful warlock, I think named Merlin or something. Very powerful sorcerer. He gets elected to be his apprentice. So his father and family send him off to go work as an apprentice for this sorcerer. But this Merlin guy is the most, and I think his name is Merlin. He's the most powerful sorcerer around the area, and he's also the most evil sorcerer. He harasses this kid a lot. There is a lot of abuse to this main character kid in the story. The sorcerer will slap him across the face just because he messes up his pancakes. He'll beat him up, and he'll perform spells on him. And one day when the sorcerer is getting prepared for his breakfast, the apprentice kid brings him some pancakes and bacon. The bacon all of a sudden turns into wriggling, alive venomous snakes that all start getting ready to crawl on Merlin and attack him. So right away he realizes that this is the work of the competing sorcerer in the area, a warlock who opposes Merlin, who doesn't like, his style and the evil stuff he does. They've been rivals for a long time. So he realized that the sorcerer, this warlock, is going to be coming to his castle and challenging him, trying to get rid of him. So he has to now prepare all of his strongest spells to get ready to go into combat, and he starts performing some of these spells on this main character kid. And the stuff that happens to this kid is horrific. It is disgusting. There's a point where I think the sorcerer does like a spell on him, and the kid starts vomiting up rats. Like, he feels this wet, clumpy, hairy thing going up his throat, and as he's about to vomit, a disgusting, rat crawls out, and it's like a mangy rat. It's got like pieces of fur missing. It's got like crooked eyes. It just crawls out of his mouth, and then next thing you know, another hairball comes up, and this time it's a giant rat. It's like the size of a cat, damn near, and he vomits that up, and he feels like he's about to die. Then the sorcerer hits another spell, and now the kid has spiders crawling all over his flesh, and he starts freaking out. And then the sorcerer changes it so that way all these thousands of spiders are now crawling under his skin, and the kid starts raking at his skin. He feels all this brutal pain, this brutal body horror, just really, really crazy stuff. And this is a very disturbing story. And then you get a magic battle. You get a battle of sorcery between the rival sorcerer and this evil guy, Merlin. And they start competing with each other. You get some wild stuff involving the environment changing, creatures coming out, stuff like that. And then finally, the story ends with a little bit of comeuppance. There's some revenge taken, and there's a character perspective change that happens in this short story that I thought was really well done. This short story is great. It's got a lot of great action scenes with it, a lot of good magic stuff, very disturbing body horror, very dark material. You got a lot of abusage that happens towards the main character, some comeuppance, and then some potentially character perspective reveals that happen, some character development, not necessarily in a good way. And overall, just a very, very fantastic story. I would give this one a 9.5 out of 10. The Most Evil Sorcerer is amazing. Next one, and sorry that I keep drinking, but I've had really bad coughs. I took a cough drop before I started this video. It's not working for some reason. Next story in here, the fourth one, is Nightmarin'. This one I actually did a little bit of a review on the Goose Junkies podcast episode. Go check that out. That talked about werewolf skin versus Nightmarin'. This story is about a girl who's plagued by these nightmares, who ends up going to this inn with her mother. And I think the mother, is like working on the inn. She like inherited it or bought it. So she has work still, and they're going to be living in this inn just for a little bit to revamp it and, utilize it. And the inn is being taken care of by this girl. I think her name is Priscilla. And this girl is sort of a little bit older than the main character girl. She's very nice, very polite, takes care of the mother and the daughter, helps them show around the place. But the place is very dingy. It looks sort of dark, kind of haunted looking. There's broken floorboards. There's rats moving around, roaches. Just a really not good place. And one day, as the main girl is bored, her mother has to go to like this important business meeting or something. And she gets left behind in this inn. And she hears somebody open, close, and kind of like wail behind a door in this inn. And she was told that they're the only people that are in here. And then she assumes now that there's somebody else in here living. So she goes to approach him, and then she gets confronted by this hysterical, really upset guy who yells at her to basically get out of his room, leave the inn, because once it becomes the full moon, he's a werewolf and he's going to turn on everybody. And she thinks he's kind of, pulling her leg, but he's being dead serious, at least in his eyes. And as she kind of freaks out and runs away, she tells her her mom about this, and Priscilla. And when they go to that room that she said was, having this guy in there, it's completely empty. It looks vacant, as if nobody was in there. And then the full moon does arrive one night because they have to stay longer due to some stuff involving the mom's work. And as they stay longer, there's some horrific stuff that starts happening, some fight scenes between potentially creatures of the full moon. And then it ends up with a sort of debate of whether this actually happened or not. ties into some nightmare, and then the ending kind of hints that maybe the whole time it was actually real. This is a dream sequence kind of story, very simple, very basic, predictable in a lot of the stuff. I would give it a 6 out of 10. It's a decent story, it's fine, nothing spectacular. I would say Alien Candy and this one are kind of on the same field, but Alien Candy had that darker, more disturbing ending, while this one is sort of more predictable. And the dream sequence kind of threw me off, but at the same time, you get that sort of hint at the end of the story that maybe this stuff was actually happening. There's more than meets the eye. So not a fully terrible story, but just sort of there. The next story in here is The Black Mask. This story is about these group of kids who hang out in their basement all the time. It's a group of 4 friends. And one day they stumble upon this black cloth mask, kind of like what Zorro wears. And this black cloth mask, one of them puts on, and they start seeing everything in like, in a completely different reality. They see these group of kids that are in this very old school clothing. It's these boys who are in like suits and hats and stuff. It's these girls who are in these very puffy old school vintage dresses of like the Victorian era. And they're shocked by this. He's kind of wondering, like, who are these kids? Why am I able to see them? He starts getting freaked out. And when he tries to communicate and call to these people, the main character tries to, they're not able to hear him. They just sort of move through and play board games and do their kind of stuff as if nothing is happening around him, as if it's some flashback or some footage back into a different time. So he freaks out. He tells his friends about it. They think that he's, tripping balls. And then eventually they pick up the mask and put it on, and they see what he sees. And they get freaked out as well. And as the story progresses, they start seeing something in the vision of the mask, which is that there's this very creepy, ominous guy who's in the background of the basement, in the corner of the basement, and he sort of looks ominous. He's got like a wrench in his hand or a hammer, and eventually the furnace blows up in this basement, and the roof comes down and crashes on top of these kids in this mask vision and kills them. So the main characters think that this might be a blast from the past. It might be showing something that happened in this house. Maybe this is a haunted, cursed item. And they try to figure out a way that they could potentially save these kids. And then some things start happening to them that mimic some things in the story. And they think that, oh, shoot, maybe the guy who was in this vision actually came back to reenact another murder or another homicide, and they have to figure out how they're going to save the kids and get rid of this dude. So that's sort of the plot of the story. And the biggest positive of this story is the twist ending. The twist ending is a horrific revelation that happens that completely changes the perspective of the story. And I thought that was really well done. A really good punchline. That being said, this used to be one of my favorite stories, but upon a reread, there is some fluff in there. The story sort of drags at certain points. It's very on the nose with certain things. There's even some urban legend stuff about like a girl burning in the furnace, which turns out to be like a complete fabrication by somebody, which just sort of felt like just thrown in there, just thrown in there. So again, the ending revelation of this story is great. And some of the concept involving the story is very cool, but it does feel a little bit dragged on at points. Nonetheless, the story gets an 8.5 out of 10. This is a very good short story and definitely one of my favorite concepts ever in kids horror. I absolutely love the concept in that one. The 7th story, I missed a story. Oh, damn. Black Mask was the 6th story. The 5th story, let me go backtrack, was I'm Not Martin, which is one of my favorite stories in this entire short story collection. It feels like a scary stories to tell in the dark, urban legend kind of story, which is why I love it so much. I'm Not Martin is about a kid who has to get, I think, his tonsils removed on Halloween night. He goes into this hospital with all these different Halloween decorations, which reminds me of Halloween 2, 1981, that setting, which I love a lot. So he has to get his tonsils taken out, and he's in an operation room where he's about to go into this room where he's about to get the operation. He's a very sort of comedic kid, very optimistic, looks on the bright side. And when he enters his room, he sees this one kid who's complete opposite. He's like paranoid and yelling, and he keeps screaming, I'm not Martin, I'm not Martin, I'm not Martin. He keeps yelling this nonstop to the nurses and doctors, convincing people that he's not Martin because he has to end up getting his foot amputated. And because he's getting his foot amputated, he's in denial. He doesn't want it to happen. He's freaking out, and this kid feels bad for him. And as the story progresses, he starts This main character starts speaking with Martin, starts getting to know him, and this kid is very hysterical and weird, so he doesn't really want to talk to him much. And then something happens that night, which potentially leads to a plot shift. And this thing that happens that night ends up with a very fucked up, very disturbing ending to the short story. If you are scared and terrified of medical horror, this is kind of a medical horror situation, a wrongdoing of practice. It is horrific. And again, it felt very much like a scary stories to tell in the dark kind of short story. I don't want to say any more about the story because it's very easy to spoil. I recommend you go check out this short story when you pick up. Either go check out the short story, pick up this book for that if you like scary stories to tell in the dark, and of course there's other good stories in here. But yeah, I'm Not Martin is a standout short story. It just felt like an urban legend. It felt very creepy, and medical horror gets to me mad. So that medical horror reveal at the end was scary as hell. So those are 6 stories. 7th story in here, back on track, is Afraid of Clowns. I didn't mean to laugh there, but I was coughing thinking about the Afraid of Clowns story. Afraid of Clowns is about this kid, as the title says, who's been very afraid of clowns. He had a situation, I think, at a birthday party where this clown that was playing around with some of the kids and sort of acting up a fool had ended up going to him and whispered in his ear, "You're gonna die laughing." And he was like, "What the fuck?" And he freaked out and he screamed and he ran away, and he's been terrified since. And every time he sees clowns, either at the circus or at birthday parties or events, he gets freaked out and he thinks that these clowns are coming after him. And every time he meets a clown, he always hears them whispering, "You're gonna die laughing, kid." He swears on it, even though people think he's hysteric, even though people don't believe him. And eventually one day, for his upcoming birthday party, his parents decide, you know what, you can't keep being afraid of clowns. We're going to take you to this local circus that's happening. And when he gets there, he ends up getting chosen to be a part of the act. The clowns end up pulling him out of the crowd and putting him through quite the brutal yet comedic yet slapstick yet dark situation where he ends up becoming the main act of their show. And something happens that may or may not involve these clowns potentially being malevolent entities, potentially having some cult-like features to them. And something happens to this kid that, again, does a sort of character perspective change, much like the stuff in Most Evil Sorcerer. You get a reveal about something that happens to the kid and the true nature and horrific deeds that these clowns in societies do. And that's I'm Afraid of Clowns. This one I gave a 7.5 out of 10. This is a pretty good short story. I love some of the scary stuff involving clowns, recontextualizing how clowns are viewed within our society, making them sort of these creepy, malevolent entities, adding a cult aspect. And that scene where the kid becomes the main show of the circus, viewing is quite comedic, but in a dark way. So I like that. The next one is The Dead Body. The Dead Body obviously was adapted into the Haunting Hour, as a lot of these stories are. The Dead Body Haunting Hour episode is my favorite Haunting Hour episode I've ever seen. It's amazing, basically perfect score. This one, it's a downgrade, not as good, but we'll talk about it. The Dead Body is kind of like a watered down Are You Terrified Yet? It's still decent, but it's about this kid who very much always gets dared to do stuff by some of his friends that he knows at school. His friends are very mean to him. They kind of make fun of him. A lot of kids at school make fun of him and think he's a scaredy cat. So he's always taking on these dares to impress him and make him believe that he's brave. And one day he gets sick of all this different stuff happening, and he ends up devising a plan. And the plan may or may not involve a dead body and somebody he knows. And this act is done as a sort of way to basically get some revenge on the kids and sort of get some comeuppance, because they believe that this prank is actually real and that he is actually brave. And in the meanwhile, he managed to formulate a plan that actually gets him the level of street cred that he wants in the school. But then there's a twist at the end of the story that sort of recontextualizes that scene. And it was very predictable. This is just a decent story to me. The episode adaptation is way better than this. But this one's just just an average story to me. Predictable, but it's fine. Next one, the 9th story, is Make Me a Witch. Make Me a Witch is about this girl who's cross-eyed. She's very much not loved in her family. Her parents don't care about her, and they very much verbally abuse her. They don't love her. She gets made fun of in school. She gets viciously bullied. She's just an outcast of society. And the story opens up with her going to the house of a witch, an alleged witch in this town. And this witch, she tries to make a proposition that, please give me your powers. Please make me into a witch so that way I can get revenge. That way I can finally feel empowered. That way I can wreak havoc upon all the people who've wronged me and I can finally be something. And the witch, ends up becoming a little bit sympathetic with her, but she does her a proposition. I will make you into a witch under the contract that you bring me your baby brother. And she says, what are you going to do with my baby brother? She's like, oh, believe me, you don't want to know what I'm going to do with your baby brother. But if you're truly committed to me making you a witch, you bring me that baby, and then I will initiate you into this sort of ritual of becoming a witch. And that's the premise of that story. It's a very dark and disturbing premise. There's a lot of emotional layers behind it, some social commentary in there done in a pretty good way. And I just like the premise of this. It reminds me of that one Haunting Hour episode called Intruders, involving the Fae and changelings that potentially involved a similar concept to this. And also My Sister the Witch, I think, is something like that. So a witch story and Haunting Hour. So this feels like this got turned into like a mix of different things. But the ending to this short story is stupid as hell. The ending of this short story is really dumb, really goofy, made absolutely no sense, and it completely plummeted that story for me. So Make Me a Witch, I gave a 6.5 out of 10. It's a fine, decent story. It's literally carried by the setup to the story, and the punchline ending is just stupid. Absolutely mind-numbingly stupid. And now we're on the last story, number 10 in the Nightmare Hour book, which is The Ghostly Stare. And this short story is my favorite one in the entire book. Spoiler alert, it gets a 10 out of 10, a perfect score for a short story. The Ghostly Stare is about this brother and sister who are out on a school class trip to go to the graveyard, and they're going to do some graveyard marking. And this is during the winter time. The graveyard is covered in a fine layer of snow. They're out there and they're sketching some tombstones, and they sort of get the creepy atmosphere and feeling of this place. And one of the girls that they know on this trip says to them this urban legend that her grandma told her, that when you go out into the cemetery, the graveyard at night, there are ghosts that prowl from the graves and try to find human hosts that they can possess, wear the skin of, wear the bodies of, so that way they can go out into the real world. And by doing this, the only way to fend off against these ghostly figures is to stare at them straight in the eye. You stare at them with these wide eyes, and you do that as a way to look straight into their soul, because the ghost has no soul. The eyes are the window to the soul. So when you look at it, the ghost will basically disappear and dissipate. And that's the only way to defend yourself against them. So as they go to this cemetery and they finish up with their field trip, they don't really believe the story that the girl is telling them. They think that, she's kind of exaggerating and pulling their leg. She's sort of that type of girl. But the sister ends up leaving one of her favorite gloves behind in the graveyard, and she has to go back that same night to go get it. And her brother tags along to go get the glove with her, and they see some horrific stuff in that graveyard. You get some disturbing depictions of things in the graveyard, really, really horrific, creepy stuff. And the stuff that these ghosts are able to do end up being horrific. And the ending to this story is super disturbing, super dark, and it'll send chills down your spine. The descriptions of these ghosts, of these corpse-like beings coming after kids, is horrific. The stuff involving the atmosphere, the creepy atmosphere of the graveyard, is really well done. And this sort of urban legends, really cool gimmick of dealing with ghosts being tied into the story, and then playing into the ending, which is a really disturbing dark fate to certain characters, is really well done. That ending to the story is straight up nightmare fuel and horrific. This story gets a 10 out of 10. It's one of the scariest kids horror short stories I've ever read. Really well done, really well paced, good premise, and yeah, 10 out of 10, a perfect story. And that's all I have for Nightmare Hour. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. We're almost at 300 subscribers. Hope to hit that by the summer. And hit that like button down below. Helps out with boosting this video up the algorithm. And comment down below your thoughts and opinions. Do you like this book? Do you not like this book? Do you agree with me? Do you not agree with me? What are some of your favorite and least favorite stories from here? And again, comment down below. Let me know your thoughts and how you feel about it. And that's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more content to come. And stay classy. Deuces. My throat, these cough drops, are not helping. Maybe I got to get the help of the ghostly stare and use it on that damn bitch-ass clerk that was selling me these bootleg-ass cough drops. And by I mean bootleg cough drops from a clerk. It was Ezekiel around my house corner. They're not even called cough drops. They're not even called Halls. These shits are called throat coaters. I think he's been a little bit too much on Brazzers when he comes up with these product titles.